Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're uncovering how the legendary Stephen King is literally taken over your weekend watch list. If you've logged into HBO Max lately, you've probably noticed a very distinct, very terrifying trend dominating the charts. I mean, it's July 2026, and the undisputed master of horror is proving that whether it's a massive studio adaptation or just a tiny indie film he happened to tweet about, his influence in Hollywood is absolutely unstoppable right now.
Okay, so here's the double feature we've got planned for you today. 1. The King of Streaming. 2. Inside the Long Walk. 3. The Undertone Phenomenon. 4. King's Golden Stamp. And finally, number 5, a profitable dystopia. Let's set the stage. Section 1, The King of Streaming, HBO Max's horror takeover. Right now, if you look at the HBO Max top spots, they're being totally claimed by horror films that share one massive common denominator, and that is the undeniable influence of Stephen King. Looking at the Flix Patrol data for the US top 10, heavy hitters like The Mummy and Deadpool 2 are actively getting shoved down the list by this new wave of high-concept terror. We've got movies hitting the platform just months after theaters and boom, instantly grabbing that coveted #1 spot. It tells us that, audiences at home, we aren't just looking for comfort watches anymore. We're actively craving the suspense, the dread, and that deep human drama that King is so famous for. And this brilliantly illustrates the dark appeal of our first film. It really captures our sort of morbid fascination with witnessing brutal survival for sport. As critic Michelle Kisner points out, quote, the terror inherent in a society that looks at death as entertainment. Because the true horror of King's work isn't always monsters or ghosts, right? Usually it's us. It's the psychological toll of a society that literally watches desperation unfold just for kicks. So keep that thought in the back of your mind, because it perfectly frames why millions of people are currently pressing play on a film about a grueling, fatal competition.
Which brings us to our first case study, Section 2, Inside the Long Walk, a dystopian survival roster.
Now check out the sheer pedigree of this team. They're blending this intense human drama with a director who just knows exactly how to craft a cinematic deathmatch. The Long Walk drops us into this really bleak, dystopian version of the 1970s, and the rules? Brutally simple. 50 teenage boys have to maintain a set walking speed. If they slow down, they get a warning. 3 warnings, they are shot by government officials. Yeah, it is incredibly dark, but it's executed so masterfully by director Francis Lawrence, the guy who essentially wrote the playbook for modern dystopias with The Hunger Games. Pair him with a stellar cast anchored by Cooper Hoffman, David Johnson, and the iconic Mark Hamill, and they've elevated a pretty straightforward premise into just a devastating emotional journey. And the universal appeal here is undeniable. Just look at these Rotten Tomato scores. An 88% from critics and an 85% from audiences. Now, diehard fans of the 1979 novel know the filmmakers took some liberties. They merged some beloved characters, completely cut others to make it fit a movie runtime, and even drastically altered the ending. Normally, a fan base would absolutely riot over that, but these numbers tell a different story. Viewers were totally captivated by the heartbreaking psychological toll on the characters. They really praised the realism of it all, that utter desperation of trying to save your friends when you were just completely powerless to do anything about it. All right, let's shift gears. Section 3, The Undertone Phenomenon, the ultimate underdog story. This is where things get wild, because we have a viral sensation that just claimed the #1 spot on the platform, and it could not be more different from our first film. On one side, you have Lionsgate's The Long Walk, a massive, sprawling $20 million dystopian adaptation. On the other side, you've got Undertone. This is an intimate $500,000 paranormal podcast indie from A24. They are sitting right next to each other on the charts. It perfectly captures the absolute magic of the streaming era. A micro-budget indie can go toe-to-toe with a multi-million-dollar studio tentpole for your exact same attention on a Saturday night. So Undertone, directed by Ian Tucson, builds this incredible suspense using a super simple premise. We follow friends Evie and Justin, who run a paranormal investigation podcast. But everything changes when they get an anonymous email with 10 mysterious, deeply disturbing audio files. Suddenly, the hauntings aren't just spooky stories from listeners anymore. They are happening in the real world, and they're specifically targeting Evie while she's trying to care for her ailing mother. It is this incredibly claustrophobic, deeply personal kind of horror. But, in a crowded indie market, a great premise doesn't automatically equal a massive hit. To break through the noise, you need a spark. You need a champion.
Which leads us to Section 4, King's Golden Stamp, the power of an endorsement. We call this the Stephen King bump. He didn't write this movie, but he gave it a glowing personal review.
He actually tweeted that it was, quote, nightmarish, and specifically said that lead actress Nina Kiri carries the film on her shoulders. And when Stephen King says something is nightmarish, the internet listens. It sent audiences running to theaters, and now straight to HBO Max. It's a fascinating evolution of the King effect. You don't even have to adapt one of his books to tap into his massive fan base anymore. You literally just have to make a movie good enough to earn his public respect. That single endorsement was like rocket fuel, launching Undertone from a niche experiment straight to a mainstream must-watch.
So let's pull back the curtain on the business side of things. Section 5, a profitable dystopia, the financials. 42x, that is the return on investment for Undertone at the global box office. 42 times its original production budget. I mean, that is a metric that makes studio executives' heads spin. In an industry right now where massive superhero movies are actually struggling to just break even and marketing budgets are routinely crossing that $100 million mark, a film like Undertone is basically the holy grail. It absolutely proves that if you have a clever script, some genuine scares, and the right cultural tailwind, like, say, a nod from the king of horror himself, you can generate unbelievable profit margins. When we break it down side by side, it's just incredible. Both of these films turned massive profits. The Long Walk took its $20 million budget and pulled in over $63 million worldwide. That proves audiences are still ravenous for grim, high-concept dystopian sci-fi. Meanwhile, Undertone took its modest $500,000 budget and turned it into a $22 million global phenomenon. So we're looking at two entirely different financial models achieving the exact same result: total dominance at the box office, and now total dominance on HBO Max.
So what is the big takeaway from this explainer? Well, the King effect proves that high-concept, character-driven horror is what audiences truly crave at home. In an era of serious blockbuster fatigue, your streaming habits are dictating the future of Hollywood. When The Long Walk and Undertone are constantly trading that #1 spot, passing over huge action flicks and big comedy franchises, executives are absolutely taking notes. The King effect isn't just about Stephen King the man, it is about the standard of storytelling he represents. We want movies that make us feel something visceral, movies that rely on creeping dread, deep psychological tension, and rich character work, rather than just empty visual effects.
And that brings up a pretty huge question. With Undertone director Ian Twasson confirming plans for a trilogy and A24 expanding their horror universes, is the next great horror franchise already streaming in your living room? The numbers are clear, the critical acclaim is locked in, and Stephen King has officially spoken. So as you figure out what to watch this weekend, are you going to fire up HBO Max and witness the birth of horror's next big empire? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and hey, enjoy the nightmares.